Coming up, Sean Marks confirms what we've all assumed. Yes, the tank is on, and this organization may make decisions that aren't about those wins on the court. Plus, though, how quickly could they pivot to pursuing a superstar like Giannis? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, this episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, where we get started is, I always say, once your team is really starting to get into the meat of a losing streak, when you got guys on the bench, when you jettison some of your veteran talent, that's when you come out and you start having the conversation about, yeah, we're thinking about tanking. We're thinking about being strategic about what it looks like for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I mean, he just said the quiet part out loud. Everyone knew this to be the case from the very beginning. I understand why executives aren't going to go out there and be like, all the L's we can take, baby. Like, that's like, they're never going to come out and say that because, it would look bad. But at the same time, everyone knows it to be true. And everyone knows that these are the best ways to, to facilitate a certain level of like draft pick that you need to get, even though it's not a sure thing, which, people are never want to run to the keyboard to tell me about it. Obviously, we get it. Like, it's not a sure thing when you tank. It's not a sure thing when you get draft pick. But what it is a sure thing is that there are only a few ways to get really high level talent in this league: sign free agents, trade for them, or draft them. Those are the only three ways that you can do it. And you need to pick the part of your timeline with the rest of your roster and sort of the assets you have, of which one of those makes sense, right? And so Mark's coming out and basically saying, effectively that they're going, you have the quote here, effectively that they're going to lose or on a night-to-night basis is not a surprise. And now, we can just rest assured that like this is going to be the case early on. When it did, to be honest, when at times early in the season, it wasn't totally clear that that's what they were trying to do when they were, winning games. So it's clear that's the case now.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it's one of those things, too, is because we've seen this organization under Sean Marks sometimes feel like, at least from the outside looking in, they're very pivotable, right? They can be swayed by getting some wins here. Maybe we'll go ahead and change course in midstream, especially in a season like this. You can't afford to do that, or you'd hate to hear Brooklyn Nets winning a little bit early in the season. Rumor has it, willing to go all in to pursue star now. And it's like, hold on a second here. We remember how deep this draft class is. We remember what it would mean to land one of those players. So when Sean Marks comes out and says, we're building this and we're building this hopefully for sustainable success, he told the New York Post, and Brian Lewis had reported on this, that's what we want. We're going to have to be systematic with some of the decisions we make. They may not always be in line with winning the next game or putting the most talent out there. And that is the aggressive part. And Brian Lewis notes in his article that Sean Marks, said what most executives would not say out loud, that there may be a Tuesday night when we just go, you know what? It's probably better if Cam Johnson doesn't make it out there tonight. Probably better if D'Angelo Russell is still kind of dealing with something. The funny part about this is you're also outwardly signaling whether or not the league really cares about the Brooklyn Nets. You're signaling, hey, we're messing around. We're messing around with the product, and the NBA has worked very hard over the last couple of years to try to get away from that. The Nets' saving grace is that they're not a team that fans are aching to see on the national stage here. So it's all right. But yeah, Sean Marks, he said it in black and white. We're going to go ahead and keep our talent off the court and make sure that we give ourselves the best chance to lose. That is as straightforward of a statement you can have in a tank season like this.
Yeah, for sure. Or like, it's like, we might not put our best foot forward in Utah because that's another team that we wouldn't mind losing to, right? Like this is like, these are the kind of games.
Circle key dates on the schedule.
And I agree with you that this is, in terms of just laying it all out there, this is as honest as you'll really ever hear someone, right? And it's frankly, it's not a good look for the league. I get it. It doesn't make sense, like from a competitive league, to basically have one guy come out and say, we're not going to be competitive, even though everyone else does it. So it's not like everyone always does it on a night-to-night basis. It's not like Brooklyn isn't the first team to ever figure this out. It's just that this guy came out and said it pretty explicitly that this is what we're going to do. Again, it's more of a league rules problem than it is a Sean Marks problem. And it's been like this for a long time. Sam Hinkie basically made it, not so fashionable to do it when he basically said, like, trust the process, and they lost all those games aggressively early on, and it didn't really turn out for them. Even though mathematically that was correct, he had like the worst PR marketing campaign for it, and that was what kind of did him dirty. It wasn't the idea, it was the marketing that kind of screwed them up, because teams been doing this forever, and it's this, it's not a secret, but it's sort of, it's hush hush around, don't come out and say it plain as day that this is what you're going to do, but when you throw out the lineups that we saw get thrown out between the Jazz and the Nets, you kind of know it to be happening. So I appreciate the honesty, and it's clear that this was going to be the thing. We are on record for the umpteenth time saying the system stinks, and we agree with everyone that thinks the system stinks. Like, I'm with you on that. I wish they had, the Premier League sort of like soccer style from, Europe, which is like every little town has a team and you just kind of work your way up and down the standings over years and years and years. Like, that system feels like one of the best that there is to incentivize winning and disincentivize losing. That's just not the way the NBA works. It's like the losses, when the Cooper flag is at the top of a draft, when Dylan Harper's at the top of the draft, you might need to go out and lose on a Sunday night against Utah. And that's just going to be the way it is. And the system stinks. And Mark's basically just said it.
And that the final point that you're making there is the one that we have had, where it's just, like this is the way that it is. And the European style, whether people follow soccer or not, when all you're incentivized to do is try your best to win, because, by the way, the punishment is maybe you get knocked out of the top league. Maybe you're not a part of the teams that get to compete for championships that people care about. The system isn't set up like that, and it's never going to be that way for the NBA or any American sport. But the reality of what that means on a season-to-season basis is what makes it so difficult. And it's not like the NFL, where there's only 18 weeks of a season and only 17 games. And guess what? You pop off and win a couple early in the year, all of a sudden it does change how you look at your season. And you can think about, maybe we go grab a couple guys here and we try to make a run. It's not that way, because even after a strong start to the season like the Brooklyn Nets had, you turn around and a 5-game losing streak, and you look at the schedule and you go, yep, there's going to be a lot of losses here, right? Even for everything they accomplished in terms of just playing above what we thought, punching above their weight class, when we turned around, it was still marking them down to be a 30 to 33 win team. So it's not like the success, quote unquote, they had early in the year was really going to inspire a change in course in terms of what the organization was going to do. Coming up here in a second, there's also, some of the sentiments from Nicholas Claxton, from Ben Simmons. Now we're starting to get that divide between ownership and management and players in the locker room and on the court. Plus, Sean Marks also hinted that they want to be ready to make a big move too. How soon could this team pursue a star? And would we be as excited to go get Giannis as maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago? And what would it look like going forward? We'll dive into that here coming up in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering, refreshing the space, helps me get back into a routine. My wife thinks the same thing, but just in case anyone needs a heads up there, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture. Their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fit my style and budget. Favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. Wayfair's site is so easy to navigate. Found everything you need in no time at all. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the tank. It's official. Sean Marks said it. He means it. We're going down. And we're taking you with us. The funny thing about this is, before we talk about Giannis and the pivot to pursuing of stars, is the idea, because we heard after the game, I'm going to paraphrase here because I couldn't get the quote back up from Ben Simmons, where it effectively was, we got to go out there and do our best to win regardless of what upper management is trying to do. Like that was the basic sentiment. And coming from Ben Simmons, it's obviously tricky because you hear him say he don't care as much because he's not a part of this team, right? What was that?
Is it tricky? I'm not sure it's tricky.
It's not tricky because you're like, yeah, okay, Ben, thanks so much. You want to go ahead? You keep doing your best, Ben. You give it everything you got because guess what? It hasn't always been good enough in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. But from a full player standpoint, we talked about this before. Young guys, it's not going to matter. They want the reps. It's opportunities for them. It may not be with Brooklyn, but it could mean being able to get a contract somewhere else. So you're never going to have to worry about effort. I mean, even Ben's sentiment there is we're going to keep playing hard and trying to win these games. But when at this point of the season, to know how much more there is to go on the schedule, you're going to have a lot of these moments going forward where there is that sense of, man, whether or not whatever's going to happen in the future, we could have won that game tonight. But word came down from on high, don't play player X, or we're going to kill this guy out on a back-to-back. You're going to know that the organization is starting to or continuing to really outwardly and publicly handcuff the roster on a night-in, night-out basis. Maybe it's okay because you have Jordi Fernandez in the locker room, and he's probably doing the, listen, man, nuts to them. We go out every night and we try to win. But from a player to coach standpoint, you know that Fernandez took the job. It was understood. It's going to be rough. There's going to be a tank, and you're safe. You're secure. It's not the same thing for the players. So I am interested as a subplot to getting this tank. What does it look like as you move forward? And you do start to get some disconnect between player, coach, ownership, GM. It's going to be a rough road here as you continue down this path.
I did get the Ben Simmons quote, by the way. It says, we've got to go in there like we want to win regardless of what the front office is expecting, which is like, I don't know, pretty vanilla. It's what are you going to say?
But it's just, it's the line though, right? It's still the line. It's like, hey, we know they don't want us to win. It's that kind of vibe, right?
Yeah. Maybe you're going for a little us against them kind of standing, and the players aren't going to go out there and like start chucking the ball over the backboard and stuff like that, and just like dribble around and just have it be a total mess. Like these guys, the one good thing we said this after the last game after Utah is that like you might signal a tank. The players, for the most part, they go out and play hard. I mean, they might be undermanned, right, in terms of overall basketball talent, but the Nets guys have played hard every single game. They played way harder than I thought they would, honestly. Like these guys have played a system style of basketball that's kept them in won a lot of games. And then also that their overall energy, especially even though it doesn't show up in the defensive rating, they do make it annoying for the other teams for sure. I think there's been times where the other teams have shown up and said, "Oh wait, what's happening here?" Because these guys are picking up full court at times. Like they're just kind of getting after it defensively, at least on a one-on-one basis. And so I don't fault the players for ever saying this. These are the right things to say. Like you should say stuff like this. And Simmons, for his part, hasn't been terrible and hasn't been great, and it's just kind of been a guy. And I think that's fine. He's clearly out here playing for probably his basketball future, honestly, around like what's going to happen to him next. Like, I'm not really sure what happens next for him. I think if he's willing to take some kind of like vet minimum deal, I think that would be the absolute most. I'm not even sure that would be available for him. Honestly, I'm not sure this season so far has done anything to turn that tide around. But regardless, him saying this isn't controversial in any stretch of the imagination. It's the right thing to say. Like, this is the right thing to say. It's like, hey, they might want to lose, but not us. We're going to go out there. We'll galvanize. We'll play hard. Probably still lose, but at least you'll know that we're trying, which has not been a problem the Nets guys have had this year.
And it's funny, too, because the difference between, so like Ben Simmons saying it, as you mentioned, it matters to what his career looks like. These younger guys that are getting run and looking pretty good, it's easier for them, for other teams in the next offseason to look at them and go, oh, but if we brought him in with our team and we have superstars and he's going to come in and be a rotation player, that can look like, hey, we can get consistency out of this guy. We can take what we see, Tyrese Martin, whether or not it ends up coming to pass. But, here's a guy that cannot. Excuse me, I get choked up when I talk about Martin. We can talk about a player that can knock down the three, can has a little bit of size, can ball handle a little bit, put him on the court with some of the stars around the league, and all of a sudden their value is not only, if not elevated, at least understood to be consistent. For Ben Simmons, it's kind of to your point. Some of these guys, hey, Dorian Finney-Smith, why does he take maybe a parting shot after he first gets moved to LA? Because you knew what was happening as you started this season. And it's a bummer when you're a veteran player who has a player option for next year and is looking to get the next contract. Even if you're Cam Johnson, he's done a great job kind of still towing the company line and saying he wants to be here. But he also said, I get that it's a business. And yeah, I got paid, but if I don't get moved to a good team soon, potentially, all of my efforts and all of my energy and keeping the numbers high and looking like I've expanded my game, guess what? It won't mean anything if I don't get moved and I'm here next year and I'm a year older and I don't quite have the step I did. So it's like it is so marginal for talents that feel like, hey, my prime is now. And it only gets worse for me if I stay here potentially. If I can survive all the way through to getting that top draft pick and being a part of the actual success of this roster, that's great. But the side of things bleeding into the day-to-day of an NBA team, that's always rough because it does, from a fan perspective at least, it takes away all of the singular focus, right? It's about the action on the court. It's also about some strategic decision-making about what the future of the organization looks like and managing assets in a way that gives us flexibility going forward, right? Like, it's a bummer when the language is all about kind of this non-sports, non-fan related opinions and perspectives.
Or you might see yourself as a veteran team and be like, hey, the next iteration is going to come like in a summer with Giannis because they kind of know something. And I wouldn't mind being part of that team, right? And so that's a transition, baby. And so you're thinking to yourself, well, we know there's a ton of cap space here. We know that they're going to be bringing in draft picks. They're going to need to fill out the roster. And it does seem like part of the plan here might be to at least leave their options open or have the optionality to bring in a guy like Giannis if he were to ask out from Milwaukee. Now, the Nets have been down this road before where you're wishing and hoping that some guy in another city asks out, Donovan Mitchell being a guy, and that we're less than a year removed from fans, needing to be toweled off with the thought of, Donovan Mitchell coming here to play with Mikal Bridges. And we saw what happened there. Like, Cleveland kind of got good and he re-signed, and that was the end of that dream. So these dreams are just what they are. But the Nets' goal, part of the Nets tanking here too, is those draft picks become optionality around, packaging together for a star or something like that, if they needed to do that too. And if you're a player on the team, you might say to yourself, well, they're going to need to fill out this roster. And if I'm, a good employee here and play well, then that's going to be, I could be part of the future here too. Because look, the story here is what Giannis or no, draft pick or no, the Nets have like almost unlimited money going into next year. And if you're a guy that played well here, played hard here, and was just a good, like I said, a good citizen, then there should be money available for you on some level. And I think everyone kind of knows that too. And the honest thing is material. Like, if you're a player in the league and you have heard that like Giannis is like, this is going to be it, like they don't win it this year, Giannis is going to ask out, and who are the teams that are going to have the best packages to put together for Giannis? Like, you would think the Nets are going to be up there just in terms of overall assets. So I think there's just a couple different stories you can tell yourself. We'll talk about Giannis here in a second, but there's a couple different stories you can tell yourself on like what the future of the team looks like, even if it's totally brutal this year.
And when a team has a ton of money, guess what? I'm the best employee you've ever had in your life, boys. Let's just see what happens, right? So come up here in a second. If Giannis is available, how far should the Brooklyn Nets be willing to go to get him? How many players should be on the table? How many of these draft picks should the Brooklyn Nets and Sean Marks be willing to push all in potentially as soon as this upcoming off season to land another chance at that superstar talent? We dive into it here in another moment.
All right, before we get to that, today, my friends over at Gametime, you love going to live events, sports, music, theater, comedy. Some of your favorite memories, it might be that concert, might be that game, the buzzer beater, whatever it is that you went to, being there live. Nothing beats it. Also, nothing beats Gametime, who's made it even easier to get tickets to those favorite events. They got the Gametime picks. It's going to filter out the fluff, show you only incredible deals on those great seats. If you go to Gametime right now, that's next week, because the Nets are on the West Coast trip right now. Start next week. You got Knicks at Nets, starting at $61 in Barclays, little crosstown rivalry. Go there, and maybe you want to boo for Mikal Bridges. I don't know. You put your money out there, go sit in the stands. Maybe let Mikal Bridges know how you feel about that. Then you got Suns with Durant right after that on Wednesday. That's starting at $19, and then Heat at Nets starting at $32. That's a pretty nice little run there of really affordable tickets over on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And when you're done with that, head over to our friends at Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, you got this ongoing problem. You just don't have time to work, life. You're trying to eat healthier, constantly feeling stressed out. Man, even like me, I go to the grocery store, buy things I didn't need, end up with too much time to actually cook it too. That's been a big problem for me. Sticking to those health goals, forget about it. It can be a struggle. Everything changes when you discover Hungry Root. It's a total game changer. Easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress with Hungry Root. It's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take the care of grocery shopping. They recommended meals and their grocery shopping based on my tastes, my health goals, anti-inflammatory, high protein, gluten-free options. Adam knows about that. The best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as we do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out.
All right, so to tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the tank, talking about Sean Marks saying that we are, in fact, tanking, and we're going to go ahead and do whatever it takes to be as bad as we can be. Players say, no, we try our best. There was that rumor probably last month, maybe a little more, about how Giannis likes Ben Simmons, is a fan of his game, and then it was like, oh, boy, here we go. Keep this guy around a little bit longer just in case. And maybe that's why Ben Simmons says, hey, listen, man, we got to keep at it. We got to do our best on the court. When you hear, so just on the very highest of levels, I want to get a little bit into like how the roster might get managed or how many picks you'd be willing to, all that stuff when it comes to Giannis. But when you hear Giannis at 31, be 32 years old next year, on the market, superstar talent, what's your initial immediate reaction to that? Because we've done this before about Joel Embiid, over the last couple of seasons. You and I were pretty quick to say, no, that wouldn't be a guy that I would want to bring in with age and injury and everything else. Where would you stand on Giannis, where he is in his career?
Okay, so I'm of two minds of this. On the one hand, in the NBA, it's been proven that to essentially win it all, which should be the ultimate goal,
yes, you
have to have one of these guys. And I would not put Embiid in that group, but I would put Giannis in that group, right? So I think just to start is to win win the whole thing, you have to have one of probably in the NBA now 7 different guys, and the list is so short. Like you just can't really do it without one of those guys, and it's just too hard. Like NBA is a team game until you kind of get to the last bit of it, and at that point you need to have like the 1 or 2 best players on the court, right? And then filled out well with everyone else. Giannis is one of those guys. So from that standpoint, your goal should be to try to get one of these guys. Durant was the same way. It was like Durant was one of those guys, right? He was one of the guys that he can be your best. The question is, can he be the best player on a championship team? The answer is yes, right? Like the answer is yes to him. It's yes to Giannis. It's yes to LeBron, right? It's yes to Tatum, like the Jokic. Like these are I would put SGA at that point now, right? Like I think it can be done. Even Luka, like these groups, these guys are good enough to be the best.
Find out about Donovan Mitchell this year, right? Feels like we're going towards a playoffs that'll confirm or deny. I wouldn't say he is right now, obviously, but we'll find out.
Even if we stretch it out to the top 12 guys or something like that, like you just need one of these. You need one of these dudes to be on your team to be competitive. Let's even say like make a conference final as the goal, right? Because like winning it all is hard.
So that level of expectation as a conversation, right?
Yeah, like we make the conference final. So let's just back it back into something even slightly more realistic. Like instead of a 1 in 30 chance, it's a 4 in 30 chance, right? So like, okay,
why the Knicks don't get cat, right? Like that's why they go make that move. It at least puts you in the conversation.
And there's a few right. There's a few scenarios where maybe the sum of your parts equals up and you can have like, not 1 top 10 guy, but 3 top 20 guys or something like that. Or, 3 top 25 guys and you can pile it together. Brunson's higher than that. Anyway, Giannis is one of these guys. So on that standpoint, I would say that it's a good move. Like you should try to go get one of these guys. If they become available, they do not become available a lot. When they are, your goal should be to get them. That being said, when Giannis becomes available, it will be pushing possibly the timeline of like the acceptable timeline of where the window is wide enough based on what you would give up to get him. Right. And so Giannis at 31, because it's not happening right now. He's 30 now. Giannis at 31, Giannis at 32, something like that. Now it's like, now it gets a little closer because you're like, is it going to age correctly? He's been really healthy, so it's not really that. It's like, is he going to age right? is like if the athleticism goes even a little bit, is there not like Durant, you never worried. It's like, hey, Durant could be 45 and shooting threes, and shooting pull-up jumpers that fadeaway jumpers that you can't stop. Like Giannis doesn't have that game necessarily. And he's averaging 31 and 12 this season. So like efficiency dropped off just a little bit, but not really like compared to his previous, like he dropped off from last year, but he's like up way over his career numbers in terms of efficiency. So this one's close. I would say yes. I would say this is the kind of move that you're usually trying to do. And so if it was Giannis and question marks, I'd be worried. Like if it was Giannis and we'll figure out because they don't even have the rest of the roster. This is the other problem. I don't go along with this, but like they don't even have the rest of the roster. Like they don't have anybody right now.
Yeah. And
so it's not just Giannis. Like they'd have to have Giannis plus 4 other starters that can play in the playoffs, and maybe Cam Thomas or like whatever. I don't know. This one's close. I would say in general, the answer should be yes to these things, though.
Yeah, and by the way, I was going to say I was going to push back a little bit. So you're right, you have Cam Thomas, but there's still the question mark, and it's really less maybe about Cam Thomas, the talent, and it's more about Cam Thomas as it relates to the Brooklyn Nets and how they feel about him and what it looks like. And to your point, so you look at one that Giannis is under contract now. When that gets rearranged, obviously could look a little bit different. The player option goes all the way out into 2027, where it's 62, 63 million. So is it going to be a conversation in 25 and 26 when he makes 54 and 58, and whether or not you want to put that extension in place already? It's not going to be a problem for the Brooklyn Nets to want to go do that. Then the next part about it is, and what are you giving up to get him, right? If you're the Brooklyn Nets, you're going to come out of this year, and let's say that they get into that top 5 of the lottery. Well, you're going to want to hold on to that like grim death. So now if you're asking me, the 48% chance to land the number 1 overall pick, the 15 or, top 4 pick, the 15% chance to land, 14% to land in the number 1 overall pick in that scenario to get Cooper Flag. Like that's really the conversation that I end up having about it is, right? What are you potentially sacrificing? Now, because the Brooklyn Nets have a million picks forever going out into the future, you can sit here and say, listen, you can't touch our first round pick. We have to keep that. We can give you back your first round pick though, because you guys might still go on a reasonable enough run here that you're going to be the mid back end of the first round the upcoming season. You have other first round picks, and you can go all the way out into 28 where you have multiple first round picks, 3 first round picks effectively there, right? So you could dump a ton into that, still have the ability to go grab a couple of the players in these deep draft classes. And then because you have all the money in the world, now we have Giannis. So who's available? Who's going to come play with him, right? So it's not hard to look at this in terms of like a pivot moment and a very quick pivot and say, oh, well, in the blink of an eye, if Sean Marks really threaded the needle on it, you could trade for Giannis. You could still draft a young premier talent to pair with him, and you could still keep intact some structure around your picks going forward. Because effectively, I think we'd be talking about, all right, kick open the championship window for the next 3 or 4 seasons, and then you'll be back into that mode of what's next and what does the next phase look like. And I think that's the real question is, are you ready to go all in again this quickly on a window that, as is with any championship, is finite? Like it doesn't just stay open forever. Even if you're the Lakers who keep dragging the bodies out there and trying to stay competitive, we don't think about them as being really capable of winning a championship, right? We don't think about Golden State after the era of so much good winning and so many championship runs. We don't think about them as being capable of winning a championship. So there's a difference there. And I think the Nets are probably looking at not only trying to win a championship if they make a move like this, but also just being really good for 6, 7, 8 years and letting Giannis finish out his career in Brooklyn. That can have value as well if you can play it right and still construct the team in a way that doesn't strip you of future assets, because that happened coming out of the Kevin Durant trade and the Kyrie and the Harden trade. The Nets had nothing, and that's what made it so dangerous, because no matter what happens, championship, if you get it, great, but if you don't, if it all falls apart like it did, you're standing there going, what are we going to do? And it was a really dark timeline before you were able to absolutely pivot on the Mikal Bridges move.
I can see them doing the same thing again too, by the way. If you're, like
this is what it is. This is what it is, right? You swing big and you deal with the fallout later. That's the nature of it.
So I can definitely see this happening again for them. I can see them going down this path again if they thought the deck chairs lined up. Now maybe maybe it's on the Titanic, or maybe it is a nice little cruise. Like it's like hard to know, but like in general, I would not be shocked to do this because, again, this is the goal. If those things are available to you and you know that, like I'll go in the anti-tanker side of this. If you know that there's a X probability of landing a top pick as compared to the full probability of getting Giannis, it's like actually very easy to know what to do.
Right.
Like
right.
you get
you can
Giannis,
have
like,
Giannis, you might get Cooper Flag. Well,
correct. Not even Cooper Flag. Forget, like, go back, like go out like another year. Let's say they didn't even do it this year. Like, if you're like, oh, we can get him now, or we can go for, an X% chance to get like one of the boozers or something like that. Like, you go get Giannis. Like I think, right. I'm not saying if you knew you could get Flagged, then no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the probability of getting him or not. Like, that's where it's closer. It's like you just don't know for sure. And so it's like not like the NFL where it's like, well, I just know, unless you're the Giants who can't figure this out. But like if you're everyone else, that like you can just, hey, if we just lose the games, we're gonna get Caleb Williams. Like, if we just lose the games, we're gonna get whoever, right? Whoever it is. In the NBA, it's not like that. So it's like, if I'm going to go for like a 28% chance of grabbing one of these guys, or 100% chance of getting a 32-year-old top 10 player right now, I think the math's pretty easy. Like, I don't think that's actually a hard math problem at all, actually.
And my last note on this is, you look at a team like Cleveland we talked about before. Hey, they had like there was this thing, and they may revisit it at some point, but they were at the threshold of, maybe it's time. Let's get everything we get for Donovan Mitchell. We'll figure it out. We'll have all the assets. Instead, they said, nope, we're going to keep you. We're going to go for it. We're going to try to still do this thing. Why? Because not being relevant is a really scary proposition for any NBA franchise. Likewise, Milwaukee's going to be having the same conversation. Like, it's not a knock on Milwaukee, but you take Giannis out of Milwaukee, what is Milwaukee, right? And so they have to have those hard discussions about how many picks does it take for us to go, yep, it's time to move on from Giannis. It's the right move for us to make that decision. And then you start to talk about what teams are capable of it. And that's why the Nets are in such an advantageous position. They have the money. They have the assets that when a star says, I'm not happy anymore, I want out, Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets have the ability to pounce and go, great, open the vault. What is it going to take to get it done?
All right, we're going to get out of here. We Nets play the Blazers tonight. Blazers -6.5 at home. So enjoy that one on the West Coast. We'll be back again. Sorry, I did that at the end. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as well.
It's absurd to divide people into good and bad. People are either charming or tedious, and that is Oscar Wilde.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. RIP. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah.